Today we're exploring a really fascinating intersection. Two things you probably wouldn't normally put together.
Yeah, it's quite a mix. We're talking cutting-edge biological technology on one side,
Right.
and then some, well, pretty intriguing lore connected to unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs.
Exactly. So we've got insights from a source that discusses this specific bit of UAP lore, and another source detailing a, frankly, major scientific breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission today is really to unpack the key details from both. And then look at the surprising connection that, interestingly, the sources themselves draw between them.
It's a dive into tech, myth, maybe, and, where they might conceptually meet.
Let's see what we find.
Yeah.
So where should we start? Maybe the science.
Yeah, let's ground ourselves in that first. Our source talks about a huge development from Japan. It's being called the world's first fully operational artificial womb.
Right. Fully operational. That's significant.
Yeah.
For people listening who follow this stuff, what makes this the breakthrough? What's different this time?
Well, the key thing the source points out is its claimed ability to support embryonic development entirely outside a human body for the whole pregnancy, potentially.
The whole time.
That's the implication. Replicating all those complex biological exchanges, nutrients going in, waste coming out, the right hormonal signals, everything a natural uterus does.
Wow.
So it's really moving beyond just like advanced incubators for preemies. This aims for true external gestation.
Okay, yeah, that level of biological mimicry, that is a massive leap. All right, so let's pivot now. Let's turn to the other side of this dive, the UAP lore.
Right. So the second source zeroes in on a specific idea. It's something found in certain strands of ancient astronaut thinking or UAP-related lore.
Okay.
And it's this notion that the figure of Adam, from various creation stories, didn't actually have a mother.
Ah, interesting. So this lore suggests an origin for, well, a foundational human figure that kind of sidesteps traditional maternal birth altogether.
Exactly that. A concept of origin completely detached from a biological mother.
Okay.
And this is where the sources make that connection we talked about. The source discussing the UAP lore, it explicitly links this ancient kind of speculative idea of a motherless origin to the modern scientific possibility represented by the artificial womb, an environment that allows life to develop totally separate from a human mother's body.
So what's really striking here isn't just having these two, totally separate bits of information floating around.
No.
It's that the sources themselves are kind of inviting us to think about that conceptual overlap. They're suggesting that this scientific potential we're just starting to see.
Yeah, like external gestation.
It resonates with, or maybe gives us a weird new frame for understanding these very old, or at least unconventional, ideas about where we come from.
Yeah, and if you pull back a bit, look at the bigger picture. It kind of highlights how let's say the bleeding edge of science can sometimes echo narratives or ideas that have been kicking around in myth or speculation or alternative histories for ages.
It's not about saying the science proves the lore or the lore predicted the science, right?
Not at all. It's more about just noticing how human ideas about creation, about origins, wherever they spring from, might find these surprising conceptual sort of parallels as our own technological abilities grow.
In the corridors of UAP legend, whispers abound of Adam the first man, born without a mother. Was his creation a feat of cosmic engineering, a miracle of an AI womb beyond human comprehension? The question hangs in the air, tantalizing and unresolved. Now, in a revelation that blurs the line between ancient myth and modern science, Japan has unveiled a marvel, the world's first fully operational artificial womb. This astonishing device allows embryos to grow and thrive entirely outside the human body, faithfully recreating the nurturing embrace of a natural womb. What was once the domain of science fiction and speculative lore has stepped boldly into the light of reality. Here, at the crossroads of legend and laboratory, we witness the convergence of our oldest stories and our newest technologies. The mythic origins of humanity, once attributed to alien architects or divine intervention, now echo in the sterile humming chambers of artificial gestation. Speculation and science march forward together, forging a future where the impossible becomes possible, and where the secrets of creation may finally be within our grasp.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine something straight out of ancient lore, really. A figure just stepping into existence, not, nurtured in the usual way in a mother's body, but somehow else.
Right. The story often told about Adam.
Exactly. And it's always had this air of mystery, hasn't it? Especially if you look at it through, well, certain UAP mythology lenses. It sparks a pretty wild thought, doesn't it? Could that kind of motherless creation point to something, well, beyond just the miraculous? Maybe even some kind of incredibly advanced tech.
Like the idea floated in these sources.
Yeah.
It's something like an AI womb.
Yeah.
Hidden in these old whispers.
Yes. And what's so fascinating and what the material you've shared really hammers home is how it takes that old mystery and just slams it right against something happening, like right now.
Yeah, it sees this convergence between these, seemingly impossible origin stories and actual cutting-edge modern science.
And that convergence is exactly what we're digging into in this deep dive. We're going through this stack of sources, exploring how these really different ideas, ancient lore on life's beginnings and lab breakthroughs on, well, how we might create it are being connected.
And what that connection might be telling us, according to the sources anyway.
Yeah.
About our myths, our past,
Yeah.
and maybe our future.
Exactly. What the sources argue it tells us.
Right. The material pulls from these descriptions of ancient whispers and brings it right up to laboratory revelations. It's charting this path from myth towards potential reality as the sources see it.
So let's start where the material does. With that ancient lore, focusing on that motherless beginning, what does the UAP mythology, as these sources present it, specifically say about how Adam emerged?
Well, the sources are pretty pointed. This lore suggests Adam came about without, the usual biological process. No mother's womb.
No womb at all.
That's the emphasis in the material. What wasn't there? No flesh, no blood, no heartbeat, nurturing him in that familiar way. It's all about the absence of that natural process.
That really paints a starkly different picture of Genesis, and the sources stress that this lack of a normal birth, it raises questions within that lore itself, right? Like, okay, so how did it happen then?
The ancient whispers of UAP lore speak of Adam, born not of woman, but of something other. A being crafted beyond the bounds of mortal womb. Was it divine engineering? Alien artifice? Or, as the modern age dares to ask, an AI womb? This isn't just science fiction, it's a defiant roar from the future, blurring the lines between ancient myth and the relentless march of progress. The whispered tales of otherworldly births and the AI laboratory now converge, leaving us to ponder, what secrets will these artificial wombs unveil about our past, and what futures will they forge?
This is where it gets really interesting, where the history or the myth suddenly smacks into current science. The material points to a major real-world scientific development that, well, for these sources, it resonates incredibly strongly with those old whispers.
They highlight the news from Japan about what the sources are calling the world's first fully operational artificial womb.
Yeah, and it's key to understand what the sources emphasize here. It's not theory, it's operational. It allows embryos to develop entirely outside the human body.
Entirely outside. Wow. That feels like, that's a direct echo of that ancient idea, isn't it? How do the sources say it actually works?
The material explains it basically replicates the crucial conditions of a natural womb. The warmth, the nutrients, that really delicate biochemical balance that life needs to get going and develop.
So it mimics it.
Mimics it, yeah. And potentially, according to some descriptions, even perfects those conditions.
Yeah.
In a totally controlled setting.
Okay, all right. So the sources lay out this ancient lore. Hints of birth without a biological mother, maybe dark tech or cosmic architects using something like an AI womb. Then, bam! They pivot to modern science actually creating a working artificial womb, life developing totally outside the body. And the core argument in this material isn't just, hey, look, a coincidence. They're explicitly connecting these two things.
That's really the heart of it, yeah.
Yep.
That's the argument the sources are pushing. They're contending that the lines between, say, ancient astronaut theories, which often pull in this UAP lore, and cutting-edge science, well, those lines aren't clear anymore. They're blurring, maybe even dissolving.
Right before our eyes, kind of thing.
Kind of thing, yeah.
And the big insight they're driving at is that this isn't just like an interesting parallel. This real tech, the artificial womb, it makes those ancient way out there stories feel, well, less like impossible myths.
And more like, potentially, accounts of things that are now or soon could be technologically doable, replicable even, by us.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
Exactly. The sources frame this convergence with some Pretty dramatic language, suggesting it's not just sci-fi slowly turning into reality.
It's more like reality is just swallowing science fiction whole.
That's the kind of framing, yes. Reality consuming science fiction. It's meant to convey a profound shift.
And the material really wants you, the listener, to get the scale of this shift for humanity itself.
Yeah, it highlights what it calls humanity's ascension to a role the sources imply was once maybe held only by, those mysterious forces or cosmic architects.
So we're moving from being the created
to potentially becoming the creators ourselves.
In the depths of UAP mythology, where ancient whispers speak of alien architects, the tale of Adam emerges, a being forged without a mother's embrace. Could an AI-wrought womb, pulsing with unearthly intelligence, have birthed such an enigma? Now, Japan unveils a revelation that shakes the foundations of existence, the world's first fully operational artificial womb. A marvel of science, it cradles embryos in a synthetic sanctum, mirroring the primal warmth of a natural womb, defying the boundaries of life itself.
Now that the tech is here or coming online, is the main question really whether we can create life this way?
Or is it? Should we?
Exactly. Is the more profound question whether we should.
The classic should we. How do the sources frame the potential, outcomes, the consequences of actually having this power?
They seem to suggest two main roads, potentially. On one hand, this capability could maybe unlock some deep secrets about our own origins, perhaps even explain parts of those ancient narratives we talked about.
Okay, so understanding our past.
But on the other hand, it warns it could just as easily lead us down paths to totally new futures, maybe even monstrous futures is a word used. It frames this moment as humanity standing at a really significant fork in the road.
And connecting this back, for you listening, why should this convergence, this whole discussion in these sources, why should it matter to you right now?
Well, because, according to the material, it really challenges our most basic ideas about where humans come from, about what life is, what creation even means.
Right, it forces you to confront how fast technology is moving.
Exactly how it's shaping not just our world, but maybe biology itself. And crucially, it highlights how these ancient stories, the ones often just brushed off as myths, they might actually hold these echoes that resonates incredibly strongly with our most advanced, cutting-edge capabilities today. It really does blur those lines, between the oldest myths, far-out sci-fi, and the actual reality we are building right now.
So just to recap from the sources, we've seen this really striking parallel they draw between the ancient UAP lore about creation without a mother, specifically Adam, and that whole AI womb idea, and today's reality, the actual working artificial womb developed in Japan.
And what the sources really stress is just how profound this convergence is. How myths and hypermodern science are meeting in ways that honestly seemed impossible just a short while ago.
Potentially forcing a total rethink.
A rethink of our origins, and maybe our future role as potential creators ourselves. So thinking about this deep dive, what does it mean for you listening? We've looked at this, factual development of really groundbreaking artificial womb tech in Japan.
And we've explored this very specific piece of UAP lore focused on Adam, supposedly not having a mother.
And crucially, we've seen how the sources put these together. They present this pretty interesting parallel, connecting the potential of advanced biotech
to that ancient-sounding idea of motherless origin from UAP lore.
So why bring these two things together? Why does this juxtaposition matter?
Well, I think it underscores how rapid scientific progress, especially in really sensitive areas like, human origins and reproduction, can sometimes hold up a strange mirror to human stories, to myths, to speculative ideas that have been with us for generations or maybe are just emerging now in new ways.
It makes you think.
Definitely. And maybe it leaves you with this question to chew on. As these scientific and technological boundaries keep getting pushed, keep blurring, what other long-standing human myths or origin stories or maybe even speculative ideas we haven't thought about much might we suddenly find ourselves reevaluating or, seeing in a completely new light?